Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in. Hi, everyone. Welcome. As you're joining us today, I'd love to hear from you where you're calling in from so we can say hello. Thanks all for joining us. Good morning. Good morning, Rose. Good morning, everyone. Hello from very damp Scotland. Hello from the DMV. From Athens, Greece. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello from Brooklyn. From LA. So wonderful to see our global community represented here today. Hello in Sacramento. I would love to hear from you one sentence from you in the chat as to why you've decided to join our program today. What are you interested in learning about today, and what made you all decide to come? Hi from Ohio. Hi from Springfield. Welcome in all. If you're new here, this is a Remake teach-in. Remake is a global advocacy organization working to ensure all of fashion's essential workers have safe, sustainable jobs of dignity. And my team member, Allison, is dropping in some information in the chat right now about the Remake Ambassador Program. If you're interested in learning more about what Remake does or getting to be a part of our work. Let's see, folks are sharing some comments about why they've decided to join us today. I don't know enough about how to help union members. That's awesome. Hopefully we'll give you some actionables that you are able to take part in today and put your activism to work. Allison's just dropped in the chat some information about the Remake Ambassador Program if you're interested in joining our team. Okay, let's talk about today's program and why we're all here. One of our community members says, I'm interested to learn how garment workers can organize and use their voices to raise concern. That's wonderful. I'd like to know more about this topic and which companies are not supporting unions. Wonderful. That's a great reason for being here. Thanks all. So we're here today to learn about freedom of association and why it matters throughout fashion supply chains. You may be familiar with this concept. You might have heard headlines about big fashion brands, maybe an REI or an Amazon, accused of using scare tactics or union busting or unfair dismissal to keep labor costs low and to keep workers from exercising their rights. But these union busting issues happen all up and down the fashion supply chain. And together we can create a better world for all workers by linking arms and working together. So today we're here to learn what is collective bargaining and why does it matter throughout the fashion supply chain? How does collective bargaining ensure that garment workers can utilize their rights? Why are these rights threatened in the first place? And what can we do today to help garment workers, in this case, garment workers in Cambodia, have their voices be heard? And we'll give you some tangible calls to action that you can use today. Like Allison says, together we can create a better world for all workers by linking arms and working together. We love to hear it. All right, to get us started today, we're going to play a short little video to set up our discussion for you all. So I'll turn it over to that.
Worker voice.
When workers come together to lift their voices and exercise their power, they make work better for everyone. Freedom of association and collective bargaining are essential to effective worker voice. But how does it work?
Elect.
Workers are free to organize
and elect leaders without anyone interfering.
Not their employers and not their government.
represent. Leaders listen to the workers who elected them and are held accountable.
Include.
Worker organizations make sure everyone is represented.
Protect.
Workers are protected from retaliation when they speak up.
Enable.
Not only are workers allowed to organize,
They also have the time and resources they need.
To bargain collectively.
Empower.
Workers are empowered by labor laws to take action.
This includes having the right to strike for better pay and working conditions.
When workers truly have a voice, they can defend their rights, improve their wages and working conditions, and shape the policies that affect their lives. Worker power is
Worker voice.
Thank you for that. I'm now calling up our panelists to the virtual stage, and I'd love to hear from them what worker power means to them, but I'd also love to open this up to our community as well. Drop in the chat in your own words, what does worker power mean to you as it relates to the fashion industry? Let's get our panelists up here. Today, we're joined by Brittin Alfred, a program officer at the Solidarity Center, which is the largest US-based international worker rights organization, partnering directly with workers and their unions, as well as Remake's very own Alexa, Senior Accountability and Advocacy Manager here at Remake. Let's begin. Brittin, I'd love to start with you. Thanks for being here today. I'm really excited to learn more about your work, and I'm hoping that you can begin by giving us an introduction into these issues, maybe set for us the context of why these issues matter. Can you explain why rights to freedom of association are so often threatened in the fashion supply chain?
Yes, definitely. And thank you, Emily. And we're really excited to be here as Solidarity Center as a whole. I know we really appreciate and respect the work that you all do at Remake. And I'm also excited to just be in a room with your community members and advocates. So to me, freedom of association is critical, and it's sort of the core right, as you all know, by virtue of being here, that allows people to decide for themselves that they want us to associate with their colleagues and with their fellow workers to advance their own conditions and to protect their own rights. So just super quickly, freedom of association is the rights of individuals to form and join groups, organizations in pursuit of this shared goal. So trade unions are obviously an example of an association, but political parties, memberships in clubs, that all counts. But freedom of association is absolutely critical for vulnerable groups, because oftentimes these are the groups that people don't want to, or that sources of power don't want those groups of people to have power. And how do you build power? You build power by joining together and having power and strength in numbers, essentially. So one of the most effective ways for power holders, whether that's corporations or governments, to stop people from collectively organizing is to take away the freedom of association or infringe on that right. And the way that we've seen that happen in the fashion supply chain is primarily by two groups of people, or two categories of actors. So this right is threatened constantly by employers and also sometimes by actual governments. So as we all know, governments are often beholden to corporate interests. Unfortunately, that's the way the world works under capitalism. And so oftentimes governments and corporations are closely linked. And especially in the fashion industry, where much of the production and labor is increasingly happening in developing countries, these governments are often really keen to attract corporate actors and investments to come and do business, to open up shop within their borders. So you'll often hear about how labor laws and protections, including the right to freedom of association, are weakened in certain countries by the government, because the government is trying to make its country and its local workforce more appealing to foreign investors and developers. So they see like, oh, you don't have strong labor laws here. We can, and you also don't have the right, the right to freedom of association is hard. So workers can be exploited and we can get a better bottom line on our product, right? So that's the way that it often plays out when you're thinking about the global supply chain in fashion. And it's sort of a race to the bottom. So corporations often move to wherever has the weakest protection for workers. And then employers themselves, feeling pressure from their buyers, from their brands, will also, even if the right is, let's say, legally enshrined and protected on paper in a country, employers will oftentimes do whatever they can to prevent their workers from organizing and to take away the right to freedom of association through intimidation, through, identifying when a worker is perhaps talking with other workers and starting to self-organize, they'll just very conveniently terminate that worker. So in the fashion industry, we see it happen both on this like sort of macro government level, and then also like in the individual workplace with everything from like a line manager in a garment factory to like the manager of the factory as the whole.
Thank you. That's so helpful in understanding. And who plays a role in protecting that right to freedom of association? How do these power dynamics play out?
So we strongly believe at the Solidarity Center that the most effective form of protection against infringing on this right are workers themselves. So oftentimes when you hear about the labor movement or you hear about unions, you think of unions as like these entities, and it's almost as though the union takes on this sort of institutional role, which it is. It's a collection of workers, but really when we say unions, like we mean workers. Like workers are an effective form of protection because they themselves can mobilize and agitate, and through collective action can push back against any infringements on the freedom of association. And then they also, workers themselves know their workplace conditions the best, right? Because they're the ones that are carrying it out and producing the product. It's their skills, it's their labor. So we see it as workers, and when they come together and form unions as a very, very effective way to protect freedom of association, because it allows them to operate. And then when it starts to be infringed upon, like when cases happen, which I know we'll talk about later, where employers start to prevent workers from organizing or prevent workers from exercising that right to freedom of association and prevent them from joining a union, then workers are able to rise up against that and bring attention to that issue. And then also ally organizations, ally CSOs, both locally within countries, and then also, you know, people such as organizations such as Remake. Those kind of NGO actors or like non-worker actors can raise attention to the issue and put pressure on the employer and pressure on the brand, and then also on the government. And also, I will say occasionally you will have someone in government who's really effective in protecting against this right.
Thank you. Thanks for setting that all up, as well as kind of giving some insight into the role that we all can play here today. Let's talk about collective bargaining. I'm hoping you can help unpack this term for us. What does strong collective bargaining look like in practice?
Definitely. So some of you all probably already know this, but just 101, collective bargaining is the name for the process where you have formed a union. Because you're a union, the way that it works is that by virtue of being this legally recognized entity, you are able to sort of force your employer to come to the bargaining table and to negotiate the terms of your employment with you. So rather than you having no say at all in your wages, in your working hours, and your safety on the factory floor, through collective bargaining and sitting across the table from your employer and laying out a collective bargaining agreement or a CBA, you as the worker, you as the union, lay out all of the and define and specify all of the terms of your employment. So strong collective bargaining starts with, or collective bargaining, from our perspective at Solidarity Center, always starts with a very strong bargaining committee. So the union will often elect, because, you know, if you have let's say you have a garment factory in Cambodia with 4,000 workers, not everyone can be at that table at the same time. So a strong collective bargaining process will look like one in which a group of members is elected by the union membership to become the bargaining committee and to bargain on their behalf. So a good bargaining committee will be representative of the workforce. So unfortunately, we live in a patriarchy. So in some situations, you will see a workforce that is predominantly female, for example. So again, garment workers, predominantly female in the context of Cambodia. So 80% female, but then you look at the bargaining committee and it's majority male. And in from our perspective, the bargaining committee should be representative of the workforce proportionally and also through like not only through their identity, like if they're man or female, able-bodied, or not, or if they come from a particular like ethnic or religious background, that should be proportional to the workforce. And when they get to the bargaining table, strong collective bargaining will entail really making sure that the union is in touch with its membership and in communication with them, and is representing worker interests, not the interests of a few, but the majority priority interests for the workforce. And then really bargaining from a position of power. So strong collective bargaining also looks like the union understanding the employer and understanding what matters to them, and having research kind of like, in their back pocket to understand how they can make a convincing case to the employer and stand firm on what they've prioritized. And some examples of what you can get from strong collective bargaining are better wages, like literally getting more money in the pockets of workers that better compensates them for their work and their expertise, safer workplace conditions. So, proper protection if you're working with a material that is, shown to be hazardous to your health, the right to strike so that you as the worker have the ability to withhold your labor when the collective bargaining agreement has been violated, and things like mechanisms for resolving disputes so that you're not just fired, but there's an actual documented process that management has to engage in with you before you're ever terminated. So that's how we see collective bargaining working in the ideal setting.
Thank you for sharing that and giving us some perspective about how it can change workers' lives for the better and some of the tangible benefits as well. Can you help us to understand at a systemic level, how can having strong freedom of association and strong collective bargaining, how could this improve the fashion supply chain?
Definitely. So from our perspective, and I'll give another example that's super concrete and tangible of something that just happened in some of our partner workplaces in Cambodia, where workers were increasingly describing how with global warming and with climate change, the factory floor was just getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and it became impossible to safely continue to carry out the work. And so we helped our union partners to actually put into their collective bargaining agreements heat stress clauses that require the employer to shut down the factory if the factory floor reaches a certain temperature, to provide cooling breaks, to provide cold water. And this actually translates not only to workers having like a safer and better and healthier working environment where they're not passing out on the floor, but then also being more productive. And we don't like to, we don't see workers as just people who produce products, but when you're talking to the employer, that gives them a really compelling case for why, like you unfortunately have to speak in these employer-centric terms to convince them this is a compelling case for why worker health goes hand in hand with benefiting the company. So if you think about that at a systemic level, if you have freedom of association and therefore the ability of unions and workers to bargain for themselves, to address their issues in the workplace, to make sure that they're healthy and they're earning family sustaining wages, then the products, like the fashion supply chain is stronger and is actually sort of, how would you say, is sort of meeting the needs of its workers while also producing more clothes and sort of the fashion supply chain continues to be there, and workers continue to have jobs that are good jobs and that are decent jobs that respect their dignity. So it kind of flows all the way up. And if you can imagine a world in which every workplace had a strong union and had the ability, like had freedom of association and therefore the ability to bargain over the terms of their workplace conditions, how that would basically eliminate, in my opinion, the majority of the issues that we see with fast fashion and the exploitation that happens.
It's almost as though it's creating a more sustainable, not only in the green sense of the word, but sustainable just for the longevity of the fashion supply chain, as being a system that protects all people who are working in that supply chain, and that these things all intersect. Thank you so much for this wonderful context. You've set us up so well today. And community, please drop in the chat any questions you have. We're going to have room for Q&A. But I want to take us now into a case that we have been working on in partnership with the Solidarity Center team in Cambodia, as well as a Cambodia-based factory, Ventura Leatherware, and implicated brands that include Michael Kors, Coach, Tory Burch, and Fossil. Alexa, can you share more with us about this case and what workers in Cambodia are experiencing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So in early June, this union busting case in Cambodia was brought to Remake's attention by a local worker-led union called the Worker Friendship Union Federation, or WFUF. And the union reported that a number of employees at Ventura Leatherware were discriminated against for participating in elections to form the union and elect its leaders. And from February through May of 2024, a number of workers were actually dismissed and prevented from renewing their contracts on the basis of what the factory was saying was performance issues. They were also detained on factory premises and faced threats and excessive monitoring by factory management after engaging in union activities. The factory even attempted to sue one of WFUF's elected leaders on claims of incitement to commit a crime and defamation. And many workers are also negatively impacted by the factory's use of short-term contracts, which is actually a very pervasive issue throughout the fashion industry and is often used as justification for the regular turnover of its workforce. And so when that happens, and there are issues that workers would like to raise, they often cannot because they're already eliminated from the workforce. And so their rights are further inhibited in that way. And so these actions really represent classic union busting tactics that have been used by factories and companies to create an environment of fear and intimidation that deters workers from organizing and advocating for their rights. They are in violation of Cambodian law, international standards like the ILO conventions, and even brands' own codes of conduct. So WFUF and its worker members and activists are confident that this treatment is retaliatory and a direct result of workers attempting to unionize on their own.
You mentioned the brand's code of conducts. Can you talk with us, Alexa, about the role that brands play in this and how factories and brands can work collectively to solve these issues? Like, what kinds of roles do buyers have in these situations?
So as large buyers sourcing from Ventura Leatherware, the brands like Capri Holdings, which owns Michael Kors, Tapestry Inc., which owns Coach, Tory Burch, and Fossil, have a responsibility to intervene and then ensure that factory management engages in peaceful negotiation with WFUF to reach resolution on these issues. And in their own supplier codes of conduct, these same companies are the ones who are asserting that their business partners are required to recognize and respect the right of freedom of association and collective bargaining, that they must also respect the legal rights of workers to freely and without harassment form and participate in worker organizations of their choice, and that their supplier partners must not threaten or penalize employees in any way for their efforts to organize, bargain collectively, or nor may they discriminate against workers as a result of such union organization affiliation. And so not only do these brands state these conditions directly in their own supplier codes, but buyers are really the ones that have the power to press the factories that they work with to respect workers' rights. And in the case of Ventura, these companies can influence their supplier partner to ensure any wrongfully dismissed workers are rehired, to then press for WFUF's formal union registration and recognition by both the government and Ventura itself, and then also to stop all forms of repression and intimidation, which includes discrimination against local union leadership and WFUF members. But to share more on what workers at Ventura are facing, we'd now like to share a message from our colleagues at the Worker Friendship Union Federation.
Thank you. They wish they could be here with you today, but it's midnight, so our video will have to do.
Brittin សហព័ន្ធសហជីពមិត្តភាពកម្មករដែលមានសង្កាត់ WAUS ការបាត់បង់សេដ្ឋកិច្ចនេះជាគ្រឹះសម្រាប់កម្មករនិយោជិតនៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជាកាលណាมันមានសេដ្ឋកិច្ចហើយទទួលបានការគម្រាមកំហែងពីតុលាការពីអាជ្ញាធរមានសមត្ថកិច្ចធ្វើឲ្យគាត់បោះបង់សិទ្ធិក្នុងការចរចាជាស្មោះភាពសិទ្ធិក្នុងការឈរជាថ្នាក់នាំសហជីពក៏ដូចជាសកម្មជនផ្សេងៗអ្វីដែលជាការព្រួយបារម្ភយើងមិនចង់ឲ្យមានការបាត់បង់ឱកាសក្នុងការដឹកនាំជាការចរចាជាសមរភាពឬក៏ជាដៃគូការងារក្នុងការរួបរวมសាមគ្គីនេះបានលុះត្រាតែมันមានការបង្ខិតខំការគម្រាមកំហែងនៅពេលដែលក្រុមហ៊ុនបានបញ្ឈប់ការងារខ្ញុំធ្វើឲ្យគ្រួសាររបស់ខ្ញុំមានការខ្វះខាតយ៉ាងខ្លាំងខ្វះខាតទាំងចំណូលក្នុងក្រុមគ្រួសារខ្វះខាតទាំងការបង់ទៅធនាគារមិនមានប្រាក់ខែបង់ទៅធនាគារពីព្រោះថាគ្រួសាររបស់ខ្ញុំគឺពឹងផ្អែកទាំងស្រុងទៅលើប្រាក់ខែរបស់ខ្ញុំអញ្ចឹងហើយនៅពេលដែលក្រុមហ៊ុនបញ្ឈប់ការងារខ្ញុំអញ្ចឹងធ្វើឲ្យខ្ញុំមានការលំបាកយ៉ាងខ្លាំងគឺនិយាយឲ្យចំទៅសូម្បីតែរកអង្គហូបក៏សឹងនឹងមិនបានផងព្រោះថាខ្ញុំអត់មានការងារធ្វើខ្ញុំត្រូវទទួលរ៉ាប់រងបន្ទុកចិញ្ចឹមគ្រួសារទាំងស្រុងព្រោះហើយប្រពន្ធរបស់ខ្ញុំគាត់បានសម្រាលកូនតូចអញ្ចឹងគាត់មិនអាចធ្វើការងារបានទេអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំត្រូវនៅមើលថែគាត់ទឹកក្តៅទៅជាទាំងក្នុងនាមជាតំណាងសហជីពត្រូវបានក្រុមហ៊ុនរើសអើងនិងបញ្ឈប់ពីការងាររហូតដល់ប្រើនីតិវិធីតុលាការដើម្បីគម្រាមកំហែងប្រកបទៀតដើម្បីជាធ្នូនៃការបញ្ឈប់សកម្មភាពសហជីពទាំងមូលហើយការចរចាជាសមូហភាពជារឿងសំខាន់សម្រាប់ពលរដ្ឋប្រទេសកម្ពុជាក៏ដូចជាកម្មករនិយោជិតនៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជាយើងឃើញថាពីសម័យកាលមួយទៅសម័យកាលមួយមានការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរយ៉ាងខ្លាំងទាក់ទងនឹងការចរចាជាសមូហភាពនេះខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់មានបទពិសោធន៍ជិត20ឆ្នាំក្នុងការបំពេញការងារជាមួយកម្មករក្នុងការចរចាជាសមូហភាពគឺយើងសំខាន់ណាស់សម្រាប់ប្រជាជនសម្រាប់ប្រទេសដែលកំពុងតែអភិវឌ្ឍគឺផ្ដោតទៅលើការពារនូវសិទ្ធិមនុស្សការពារនូវសិទ្ធិពលរដ្ឋការរំលោភច្បាប់ផ្សេងពីសំណាក់អ្នកវិនិយោគទុននៅកម្ពុជាក៏ដូចបណ្ដាប្រទេសមួយចំនួននៅក្នុងប្រទេសមានដៃគូថ្នាក់ជាតិថ្នាក់អន្តរជាតិច្រើនធ្វើឲ្យការចរចាមានភាពល្អប្រសើរឧទាហរណ៍បច្ចុប្បន្ននេះការចរចាប្រាក់ឈ្នួលអបបរមានៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជាកើតឡើងពីការតវ៉ារបស់កម្មករនិយោជិតនៅឆ្នាំ2013 2014ដើម្បីឲ្យមានការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរការវិវត្តឡើងវិញយើងឃើញថាការតវ៉ានេះធ្វើមានការសម្របសម្រួលពីថ្នាក់រដ្ឋាភិបាលរហូតដល់មានបង្កើតគណៈកម្មការបច្ចេកទេសចរចាប្រាក់ឈ្នួលវាជាជោគជ័យសម្រាប់កម្ពុជាដែលមានការវិវត្តទៅរកការចរចាប្រាក់ឈ្នួលនេះខ្ញុំសូមអំពាវនាវដល់ brand ដែលជាអ្នកបញ្ជាទិញ buyer ទាំងឡាយដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធនៅកម្ពុជាទិញនៅកម្ពុជាសូមដាក់កំហិតនិងរក្សានៅសិទ្ធិស្របច្បាប់ពលរដ្ឋទូទាំងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាក៏ដូចជាទូទាំងសកលលោកដើម្បីរក្សាបាននូវភាពថ្លៃថ្នូរនិងក្រមសីលធម៌របស់អ្នកបញ្ជាទិញហើយសូមឲ្យមានកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការឲ្យឆាប់រហ័សក្នុងការដោះស្រាយជូនប្រព័ន្ធការងារបន្ទាប់ពីនេះខ្ញុំបាទជាប្រធាន WSUS សូមអំពាវនាវឲ្យអង្គការជាដៃគូនៅក្រៅប្រទេសជាពិសេស brand ឬអង្គការនានាទាំងអង្គការសិទ្ធិមនុស្សមេត្តាជួយជំរុញឲ្យបង្កើតការសម្របសម្រួលនិងឲ្យពួកគាត់បានចូលធ្វើការងារវិញបញ្ឈប់ការរើសអើងទាំងឡាយរបស់ក្រុមហ៊ុននិងធ្វើទុកបុកម្នេញមកលើកម្មករដែលជាថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំសហជីពរបស់យើងខ្ញុំបន្តទៀតហើយក៏សូមតែក្នុងនាមជាដៃគូការងាររបស់ក្រុមហ៊ុនសូមជំរុញឲ្យក្រុមហ៊ុនផ្ទាល់អនុវត្តនៅកាតព្វកិច្ចរបស់ខ្លួននៅក្រមសីលធម៌អ្នកបញ្ជាទិញនិងរុញឲ្យមានសហជីពមួយដែលអាចចរចាជាសមូហភាពជូនកម្មករយើងបានហើយនឹងបញ្ឈប់ការគំរាមកំហែងទាំងឡាយទាំងប្រើអំណាចអាជ្ញាធរក៏ដូចជាតុលាការទៅលើពួកគាត់បន្តទៀតបាទសូមអរគុណហើយក៏សូមជូនពរអស់លោកលោកស្រីជួបតែសុខស្ដីចម្រើន
Thank you for that testimony from the Worker Friendship Federation Union. Collectively, this community here at Remake can have tremendous impact, and we've seen this happen from helping unlock $22 billion in stolen wages during the COVID-19 pandemic to pressuring some of the largest fashion brands in the world to sign binding agreements for workplace safety, like the International Accord. When Remake fights together, we win. So, Alexa, I'm hoping you can share with us how the Remake community can use their voice to help today.
So Remake and WFUF are calling on the community today to ask that the implicated brands take responsibility by first ensuring that all wrongfully dismissed workers are reinstated with back pay, and second, recognizing and accepting WFUF as a valid union by supporting their registration process and ending all forms of retaliation against union activists. So we're flooding the Instagram pages of Tory Burch, Coach Michael Kors, and Fossil today. And we're asking everyone to ask them to stop union busting in Cambodia and to support freedom of association for their workers.
I'm dropping those links in the chat for you as we speak, hoping that the Remake community can drop this message. Thank you. Some community members have said they've been posting. They'll continue to do so. That's wonderful. Thank you for applying this pressure. It's so crucial to the process. And we, as well as our worker partners, appreciate everyone's solidarity. Give a thumbs up when you have taken this action. You can drop it in the chat or react on your Zoom screen. Awesome. I'm also going to open up our conversation today for questions. And so please drop any questions that you have in the chat as well. And we'd love to hear what you learned on today's call as well. So I've just dropped a Remake poll asking what you learned on today's call. Thank you, Alexa, for also dropping in the chat Remake's Instagram post. You can continue to elevate the calls to action as they're there as well. Drop us a thumbs up when you've been able to take action here today. Or leave us any questions that you have on reflection. Thank you. Thank you for everyone who's able to take action here today. We've got a hand raised for a question. Bryce, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that what other what can trade unions do in the UK to show their solidarity to basically the other unions in Cambodia? Because I really think that I think the trade union movement in the UK really needs to step up and really needs to talk more about these things and actually maybe give a bit extra maybe support maybe. Just curious to hear what we can be able to do. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So the question is, how can unions have solidarity across borders? Brittin, I don't know if you have a perspective on this that you'd like to share.
Yeah, certainly. And thank you, Bryce, for the question. It's something that we try to do at Organizational Solidarity Centers, connect unions in different countries to build transnational solidarity, which is hard to do. I think if in collaboration with Remake, there is some sort of coordinated day of action, we would probably ask something. And, my instinct is always to say, like, well, let's ask the workers, like, let's ask WFUF what they think would be most useful. But one example of something that they might identify is for, a group of union members in the UK to get together with signs and take a photo. And we would then, submit that on social media outlets and to the targeted brand and buyers to show that this is a global movement, that it's not just isolated to workers in Cambodia, and that there's solidarity. I know that doesn't seem like much, but when you do that in multiple countries, like we've done coordinated days of actions before across the globe and actually gotten not a response, but attention is paid at the very least, like your eye is turned there. And then another thing that can sometimes be even more impactful is when unions who are in a similar industry in the UK, so who are also in the fashion industry in the UK, can like appeal to their union federation, their global union federation, and sort of try to put pressure on or not put pressure, but sort of identify issues that are shared, that are specific to that sector, and say, like, as garment workers in UK, we support what's happening with our brothers and sisters in Cambodia. And sometimes we found that doing that, like we did that, for example, in Cambodia, we had we have an ongoing campaign with a casino there, and we connected some casino workers in Las Vegas here in the United States with casino workers who'd been, wrongfully terminated due to their union involvement in Cambodia. So sometimes too, even just like more direct union member to union member contact, even if that's just getting on a Zoom call, if we don't have the funds to facilitate an in-person exchange, getting on a Zoom call for workers to see and hear that there's a worker sitting in the UK who cares about them. It might not have, the ability to move the brand or the buyer, but it means a lot to the worker to hear support coming from someplace so far away, and to just sort of keep spirits up and keep things going. I know that sounds sort of more emotional and less tangible, but it actually makes a huge impact in terms of keeping workers' spirits up and keeping them engaged in a fight that can feel impossible when they know that they have the support of strangers who just see what's happening and see that it's unjust and support them.
Thank you for that. That's so helpful. And I love also that you said, the first thing that we should do is we should speak to the workers about what actions they need, just to share with our Remake community. As an organization that serves garment workers, we take all of our directive from garment workers and their unions. And so when we, are calling to action, asking you to get attention from brands, just know that these requests are always at the direct attention or at the direct request of the worker partners that we're in communication with. And they see you taking action and they appreciate that solidarity. It's very meaningful. Alexa, I don't know if you have anything you want to share more about that.
Yeah, I would say, although brands are maybe not so inclined because of all the red tape that they face to like post or react on anything publicly, just know that they do see it, and it does push them to act behind the scenes. Remake has also been trying to reach out to all the buyers at this factory and trying to open up different conversations. And we do see an uptick in engagement when we do have public actions like this. So it does get the attention of their PR teams, it gets the attention of their higher ups, and that kind of has a trickle down effect that gets them to engage more on these issues directly.
Absolutely. Do you have any other questions from the community? I've just dropped our CTAs once more in the chat. Thank you all for taking those actions. Yes, definitely. We see their reaction behind the scenes. Yes, please know that your voices are being heard. 100%. It really makes a huge difference. Awesome. Folks are leaving check boxes. You've taken our CTAs. Done. So wonderful. We are going to share the recording for this call as well as the important calls to action and links. Those will be going out through our Ambassador Slack. If you are not yet a part of the Remake Ambassador program, we've shared some information for you about how to get involved. If you're wondering, what is the Remake Ambassador Slack? You can click here, get those resources, email us at ambassador@remake.world with any questions that you might have. Our Remake Ambassador program is at the heart of all of the impactful work that we do. And if you want to get more involved in changing the fashion industry on the systemic human rights level, we would love to have you. You can learn more about it at the links that we have shared here. We really appreciate you all taking the time from your day to learn more about these important issues, and most importantly, to link arms together and get in this fight with our worker partners in Cambodia. Let's please give a warm round of applause. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful, and have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you all very soon.
Thanks, everyone.